So mapping the basic properties. So if your class is annotated, then all the properties of the class are considered to be persistent by default unless the JavaX persistent transient annotation is used, right? So let's look at the very first annotation to map a field which is let's say private string description in the item table with a column in the database. Let's look at the code example of how to do that. So as you can see that in case of item, we define at column to a name and you specify the name of the column, and then you can specify length, nullable, updatable, insertable, etc. Right? So this item name is the name of the column in maps to the name of maps to the column in the table. So this is the column annotation. So now after the column annotation, so you also have some special type of annotations that are used for default values and database generated values, right? So let's take for example, you have a certain property that is generated by the database at the time the row is inserted. Now what this means is Hibernate applications have to get that value that is inserted, or the object has to be refreshed after the database generates the value. We use certain annotations which delegate this work of retrieving the value of the database generated values from the DB. So there are a couple of annotations and which we will look at now. So let's say for example we have a last modified field. So this field is always has to be created or had to be inserted or updated by the database, and it's a field that is always generated by the database, right? So if you provide art generated and generation time as always, when you annotate using art generated and generation time dot always, after you insert the item, the database, you will see that Hibernate issues a select just after the insert to retrieve the value of this column that is last modified, right? So that is why we use last modified. There is a special case of database generated value which are default values, right? So there is the special case of Hibernate, generated, or sorry, rather database generated value called the default value. So so we say that the default value, let's say for example, take initial price. We want in our auction every item to have at least a minimum default price of $1. Right? For this, we use the same art generated annotation, but with the generation time art dot insert. And you also have to take care that to use the dynamic insert and update. Why? Because if after the first insertion, the value is $1, and on subsequent update, if dynamic insert and update is not enabled, then it will update the current value of $1 to null. So you should also take care of that. Now next we will talk about mapping components or value type like address the in the user entity class.